Hey everyone, and welcome back to our podcast.
I'm so excited for today's episode because we're diving into a topic that some of you have asked about.
Welcome to the Infinity English Podcast. Here you'll find C2 Fluency clinics, native listening practice, and the ultimate roadmap to advanced communication. So let's start today's podcast.
Have you ever found yourself in an English conversation where your mind was flooded with perfect vocabulary, but your mouth simply froze? That moment of profound silence.
Absolutely, Ibrahim. And I know millions of our listeners experience that fluency freeze every single day. I'll tell you right now, the cause of that freeze isn't a lack of grammar, it's a fear of being imperfect.
Exactly. And that's why, in today's episode, we aren't just discussing learning tips, we are going to strategically dismantle that fear. We will show you why you should stop learning grammar rules and start seeing confidence as your most powerful weapon.
This episode is your definitive roadmap. How to speak English fluently and confidently, starting right now.
2. The confidence myth. To achieve fluency, we must first shatter the biggest mental roadblock, the confidence myth. Most learners operate under the false premise that perfection precedes action. They believe that if they master every tense and every rule, confidence will follow. Why is this assumption fundamentally flawed?
It's flawed because it traps the learner in a vicious cycle. The formula they follow is, when I am perfect, then I will speak. But the truth, derived from linguistic science, is you only get perfect when you start speaking. You cannot wait for confidence to arrive. You must build confidence through action. Perfection is the destination, but imperfection is the starting line.
So, to break this myth, we need a new metric for success. We call it the fluency equation. Fluency is not accuracy, it's momentum. Linda, elaborate on why momentum is superior to accuracy in a real-world conversation.
Momentum is everything. Accuracy is your engine, but momentum is your wheels. In conversation, native speakers are incredibly forgiving of minor grammatical errors, provided there is flow and speed in your delivery. If you stop abruptly, if your mouth freezes while retrieving a word, that is when you truly lose the listener's attention and sever the connection. Fluent speakers make mistakes, they just don't stop talking. That is the critical distinction.
This sounds liberating. So, how should a learner, conditioned by years of school tests, begin to approach their errors? What is the first actionable step to see a mistake not as a failure, but as data?
The first step is to embrace imperfection. You must shift your goal. Tell yourself, my primary objective is to deliver my message. My secondary objective is to use perfect grammar. When you speak, even incorrectly, your brain records the error. The next time you attempt that structure, your brain instinctively tries to avoid the recorded mistake. The more you speak, the faster your internal grammar checker develops. If you remain silent due to fear, that internal checker never gets the data it needs to start operating.
This mindset shift is vital, but we need physical tools too. I believe a simple yet profoundly effective technique for building immediate confidence is the shadowing technique. How does this simple drill instantly transform a learner's speaking momentum and intonation?
Shadowing is phenomenal because it's a motor skill workout. It's the linguistic equivalent of a warm-up before a heavy lift. When you immediately mimic a native speaker, you are not just acquiring words, you are training your facial muscles and tongue to handle the complex rhythm, pitch, and speed of connected English speech. This process of physical preparation tricks your brain into becoming more confident when it's your turn to speak. Your mouth is ready, so your mind follows.
3. The internal monologue, activating passive knowledge. Linda, we've established that momentum is key and fear is the main adversary. For many C1 learners, the biggest frustration is the huge gap between their passive vocabulary, what they recognize, and their active vocabulary, what they can use spontaneously. We need a bridge, and I believe that bridge is the internal monologue method.
That is absolutely essential, Ibrahim. The monologue method, or self-talk, is the safest and most efficient psychological bridge. Why? Because it completely eliminates social anxiety. The learner is training their brain in a zero-risk environment. This is where you practice converting recognition into retrieval.
Tell us exactly how listeners should implement this. Should they just think?
No, they must speak out loud, even if it's a whisper. Start with simple narration. Describe what you see, what you are doing, or what you plan to do in continuous English. I am walking to the kitchen. I need to make a cup of tea. The water is boiling. Then, graduate to internal debate. Argue with yourself about a recent news article or a personal decision. This forces the brain to spontaneously generate complex structures like conditionals, like if I had gone to the meeting, and nuanced argumentation.
The genius of the internal debate is that it demands the use of high-level discourse markers, words like consequently, nevertheless, furthermore, which are the very building blocks of C1, C2 fluency. If you can debate a topic spontaneously in the shower, you've already won half the battle.
And the immediate benefit of this method is rapid word retrieval. The monologue method forces the passive vocabulary, which sits dormant in the memory, to move into the active, readily available memory banks. This drill cuts down on those agonizing silences during real conversations. The more times you successfully retrieve a word alone, the faster and more confidently you will retrieve it in a high-stakes environment.
4. The power of tactical pausing. Now, let's address those inevitable moments when the brain does freeze. The silence feels crushing. Advanced speakers don't panic, they use silence as a tool. We call this the power of tactical pausing.
This is a critical concept to differentiate advanced learners from intermediate learners. Intermediate learners fill the silence with disfluencies like like, you know, which signal hesitation and a lack of control. But tactical pausing is a deliberate tool.
How can a learner replace the nervous with a controlled and professional pause?
By using cognitive fillers, C2-level phrases that buy the brain time to process the next thought while maintaining an air of thoughtfulness and control. Instead of saying you should be deploying phrases like, "That's a thought-provoking question. Let me rephrase that for clarity." That warrants further consideration. To put it succinctly,
those phrases sound intelligent and engaged. They signal to the listener, I am not lost, I am formulating an articulate response. It buys the speaker 3 to 5 seconds of processing time, which is an eternity in spontaneous conversation.
Exactly. This flips the script. The silence is no longer interpreted as incompetence. It is interpreted as intellectual rigor. The listener assumes you are delivering a carefully crafted, sophisticated response simply because you used an advanced cognitive filler to manage the pause. This is a purely psychological confidence hack that relies on advanced vocabulary.
5. From passive to active, targeted vocabulary activation. Linda, a common pitfall for intermediate learners is relying solely on extensive reading and listening. They have this massive passive vocabulary, words they understand perfectly, but can never deploy spontaneously in conversation. If confidence is built on momentum, and momentum relies on readily accessible words, how do we force those passive words into the active memory bank?
That is the critical jump from C1 comprehension to C2 performance. The solution is output-driven vocabulary acquisition. Stop trying to memorize long lists of words you encounter. Instead, focus only on the words you want to use in a conversation.
Explain the process. How does a learner make the commitment to use a word?
It requires the 3 times rule. When you hear a C2 word you like, say juxtaposition or ubiquitous, don't just write down the definition. You must immediately create 3 unique sentences using that word specifically related to your own life or work. Then you commit to using that word at least once in a real conversation or a spoken monologue within the next 48 hours. This forced retrieval process moves the word from passive recognition to active use.
That is profound. You are forcing the brain to recognize the word's value and accessibility. This method tackles the retrieval speed problem directly, ensuring the word comes out fluidly when needed, not 5 minutes after the conversation has ended.
Exactly. And this leads to an even more advanced strategy: thematic vocabulary stacking. Instead of learning random words, focus on a high-value theme for a week, like critical analysis or negotiation language. Learn 5 synonyms for disagree, e.g., refute, challenge, contest, and commit to using them that week. This stacking approach allows you to deploy multiple... Exactly. And this leads to an even more advanced strategy: thematic vocabulary stacking. Instead of learning random words, focus on a high-value theme for a week, like critical analysis or negotiation language. Learn 5 synonyms for disagree, refute, challenge, contest, and commit to using them that week. This stacking approach allows you to deploy multiple C2 words confidently within a single complex argument.
The 6th mindset, the speaking challenge. We've now armed the listener with psychological tools and vocabulary techniques, but none of it matters without genuine output. What is the biggest barrier that still prevents many learners from starting, and how do they overcome the isolation of solo practice?
The barrier is the social risk. Practicing alone is safe, but fluency requires the unpredictable pressure of real-time interaction. The solution is the output-first mindset. Treat every practice opportunity, however small, as more important than any passive learning.
This means seeking out real conversation, which many find terrifying. What low-stakes options exist for learners to engage in genuine conversation where the focus is on communication, not correction?
Start with micro-interactions. If you are learning online, commit to sending a 1-minute voice note to a language partner daily, summarizing your day. If you are learning in person, commit to using English for every possible transaction, no matter how brief. Ordering coffee, asking for directions. These micro-interactions build essential situational confidence.
That is brilliant. You are making small, sustainable bets on your confidence. And what about dedicated, longer practice? The C2 level demands sustained, complex output.
That requires the 3C engagement model. Consistency. Practice speaking daily, even if only for 10 minutes. Challenge. Regularly attempt debates or spontaneous presentations on unfamiliar topics. This mimics real-world stress. And connection. Find a non-judgmental native or advanced partner, ideally not a teacher, who focuses on listening to your message rather than correcting your every error. This ensures the environment values momentum over accuracy, reinforcing the most important lesson of confidence.
7. Tactical fluency drills, the daily 15-minute workout. Linda, we've now armed the listener with psychological tools and vocabulary techniques. Now we need to give them a tactical, physical workout. Fluency isn't learned by passive absorption. It's earned through disciplined, daily physical drills. What are the most efficient 15-minute drills a C1 learner should integrate into their daily routine?
We'll focus on 3 non-negotiable drills that require only a phone and a timer. These are designed to bypass the conscious brain and build automaticity. The first is the rapid retell drill. Listen to a complex English news segment or a short podcast, around 2 minutes long. Immediately after listening, record yourself summarizing the content for 1 minute using only the vocabulary you understood. The goal is speed, not perfection. This trains your brain for instant retrieval under pressure.
That addresses both listening and speaking retrieval speed. What about expanding the complexity of the language used?
That requires the constraint drill. Choose a simple C1 word, say important. Then challenge yourself to describe a recent experience without using that word. You must use its synonyms, crucial, pivotal, essential, significant, instead. This forces your brain out of its comfort zone and activates those higher-level C2 vocabulary items that sit unused in the passive memory. It is uncomfortable, but it is necessary.
The constraint drill is brilliant for upgrading linguistic precision. Finally, what simple drill tackles the confidence killer of feeling slow or robotic?
That's the improvisation challenge. Set a timer for 60 seconds. Choose an abstract topic, the ethics of AI or the future of commuting, and force yourself to speak continuously until the timer stops. If you freeze, use a cognitive filler, like that warrants further consideration. The objective is to maintain uninterrupted sound, teaching your mouth and mind that you are capable of sustained, complex output. This rebuilds confidence 1 minute at a time.
8. Mastering accent barriers, the confidence breaker. Let's talk about the accent barrier. For many learners, feeling that their accent is wrong or too foreign is the biggest confidence killer, regardless of their grammar level. How do we address this psychological block, and what is the practical goal for an advanced speaker?
First, we must redefine the goal. The goal is not to eliminate your accent. The goal is clarity and intelligibility. Your accent is your linguistic identity. Eliminate it and you compromise your confidence. However, we must work on the specific phonetic features that genuinely impede comprehension.
What are those specific features that listeners should focus on?
The primary targets are consonant clusters and intonation. Most listeners struggle when non-native speakers simplify consonant clusters, like saying desk instead of desks, or misuse vowel length. The practical solution here is mirror work. Record yourself saying difficult cluster words like strengths or breathed. Watch your mouth in the mirror to ensure proper placement.
And the second critical point you mentioned, intonation, which is crucial for conveying emotion and meaning.
Intonation is the music of English. When a non-native speaker uses flat intonation, they sound robotic or disinterested, which immediately damages listener engagement and therefore the speaker's confidence. The practice here is emotional shadowing. When doing the shadowing drill, don't just mimic the words, mimic the emotional arc, the surprise, the anger, the excitement. This trains your voice to use pitch and stress to convey meaning, making you sound more dynamic and confident.
9. Environmental immersion, the real-world lab. Linda, fluency isn't something that only happens within a classroom or a structured study block. For advanced learners, the fastest pathway to automaticity is treating the entire environment as their real-world lab. How can learners, particularly those who don't live in an English-speaking country, effectively turn their daily surroundings into a constant source of output practice?
This is a high-level strategy, Ibrahim, because it tackles the lack of authentic context. We have two powerful methods here, the labeling protocol and the conversational spy. The labeling protocol is simple. Take common objects in your immediate environment, the refrigerator, the door handle, the remote control, and label them not with the basic word, but with a C2 descriptive phrase. For instance, don't label the window, label it the source of ambient light, or the thermal regulator. This forces your brain to generate complex, functional language related to everyday objects, making that vocabulary accessible immediately when you need it.
That is brilliant for moving vocabulary from theoretical to practical use. What about output? How does one practice speaking when no one else is around?
That brings us to the conversational spy. When you are observing a situation, waiting in line, watching people interact at a cafe, or riding public transit, narrate the scene out loud in your head. Describe the interactions, predict the outcomes, and analyze the body language using sophisticated English. The man's reticence suggests he is apprehensive about the impending negotiation. This continuous, spontaneous, real-time narration forces your brain to connect advanced vocabulary with tangible human actions.
This method directly addresses the gap between knowing English and using English spontaneously in context. It trains the brain to bypass the translation process and think directly in the language, which is the definition of fluency.
10. The strategic error log, data-driven improvement. We've encouraged listeners to make mistakes, the error budget. But mistakes are useless unless you learn from them. The next tactical essential is the strategic error log. This is where advanced learners differentiate themselves from intermediate ones.
Most learners keep a vocabulary list. Advanced learners keep an error log. The focus shifts from logging what you don't know to logging what you misused. The goal is not to list every mistake, but to isolate the fossilized errors, those habitual, stubborn mistakes that you make repeatedly. For instance, mixing up prepositions like depend on versus rely with.
What is the process for logging and fixing these deeply ingrained mistakes efficiently?
It's a three-step process. Isolation. When you make a significant error, either while speaking or during your monologue method, record the exact incorrect sentence. Correction. Immediately write the single, grammatically correct version. Substitution. Create 5 new, perfectly correct, personalized sentences using that corrected structure. This forces high-volume, conscious output to overwrite the incorrect neural pathway. The error log is your personalized curriculum for accuracy improvement.
11. Strategic discourse markers, the architecture of fluency. Linda, C2 fluency isn't just about the words themselves, it's about the architecture of the conversation. Many advanced learners struggle with coherence, making their complex ideas flow logically. This requires mastering strategic discourse markers. These are the signposts that guide the listener through complex arguments.
That's absolutely pivotal. Intermediate speakers connect ideas using simple conjunctions like and or but. Advanced speakers use markers that signal the direction of their thought process. This isn't just grammar, it's a rhetorical tool that signals confidence and intellectual control.
What are the 3 most high-impact categories of discourse markers our listeners should be actively implementing?
We focus on contrast or concession, conclusion or summary, and amplification or addition. Contrast or concession. Instead of saying but, use nevertheless, notwithstanding, or having said that. These show you acknowledge the counterpoint while introducing your superior argument. Conclusion or summary. Replace in conclusion with to summarize the crux of the matter, ultimately, or hence. This signals authority and finality. Amplification or addition. Instead of also, use moreover, furthermore, or in addition to that. This builds the complexity and sophistication of your argument.
These markers don't just connect words, they manage the listener's expectations. By deploying moreover, you signal that the argument is getting deeper and more substantive. This linguistic control naturally translates into speaker confidence.
And the daily practice here is sentence extension. Take a simple sentence you hear. The market is slowing down. Now extend it using all three categories. The market is slowing down. Nevertheless, our Q3 results were satisfactory. Furthermore, we must now pivot our strategy. Ultimately, the solution requires innovation. This drill forces active use of high-level markers. 12.
Managing self-correction, the flow killer. Let's talk about a major fluency killer for perfectionists. Managing self-correction. When a learner realizes mid-sentence they made a mistake, they stop, backtrack, and correct themselves, effectively destroying their momentum. How should an advanced speaker handle a mid-sentence error?
This is a direct application of the fluency versus accuracy rule. When you are engaged in spontaneous speech, you must prioritize momentum. The self-correction process is a habit, a reflex, ingrained from test-taking.
The rule is simple. Do not stop unless the mistake fundamentally compromises meaning.
The rule is simple. Do not stop unless the mistake fundamentally compromises meaning.
You ignore it. You keep going, deploying a cognitive filler if necessary, and use your error log after the conversation is finished. The listener rarely notices a minor error, but they always notice when the speaker halts and backtracks. Stopping draws a huge, unnecessary spotlight onto a small flaw, eroding the speaker's confidence in real time.
If the mistake is major, say using a completely wrong word that changes the intended meaning, how does one recover quickly and professionally?
You use a quick retraction marker. Phrases like, I should clarify, to rephrase, or what I meant to articulate was. These are quick, professional acknowledgments that maintain flow and authority. They are not nervous fillers. They are brief rhetorical tools that signal an immediate correction without sacrificing confidence. This ensures that the speaker remains in control of the conversation even when recovering from an error.
13. The performer mindset, from student to speaker. Linda, we've discussed numerous tactics, but true, sustained confidence requires a fundamental identity shift. Learners must stop seeing themselves as students of English and start viewing themselves as performers or speakers. This psychological barrier is immense. How do we facilitate this shift from analysis to spontaneous performance?
This is perhaps the most advanced psychological hurdle, Ibrahim. The student mindset prioritizes accuracy, analysis, and fear of grades. The performer mindset prioritizes communication, connection, and energy. We achieve this shift through effective filtering reduction.
That sounds technical. How does a listener practically reduce their affective filter, the anxiety that blocks speech?
By incorporating performance practice. First, use role-playing. Dedicate time to practicing specific personas. If you are preparing for a job interview, don't just answer questions, pretend you are the confident, authoritative candidate. If you are giving a presentation, practice the physical elements, gestures, vocal projection, stance, while speaking English. This external focus on the performance reduces the internal focus on the fear of making a mistake.
That is brilliant. When you focus on being the performer, you temporarily forget that you are the learner. What is the second, simpler way to reduce that filter?
Vocal variation. People who speak monotonously sound less confident even if their grammar is perfect. Practice using wide vocal ranges to express emotion, enthusiasm, disappointment, seriousness. This makes the speech sound more dynamic and authentic. When your speech is authentic and dynamic, Your confidence naturally elevates because you are engaging the listener. You are no longer just reciting words, you are delivering a message.
14. Habit stacking. Automating fluency. Finally, Linda, we must address the issue of long-term sustainability. Motivation fades, but habits endure. How do C1 learners automate their high-level practice so that fluency becomes an ingrained habit rather than a sporadic effort?
The solution is habit stacking, a technique where you attach a new, desired English habit to an existing, established daily routine. This eliminates the need for motivation. For instance, existing habit, making morning coffee. New English habit, performing a 1-minute monologue while the water boils. Existing habit, checking your phone in the evening. New English habit, reviewing 5 entries in your error log before opening social media.
That is profound. You're using the momentum of an existing habit to drive the new, desired habit, reviewing errors. This is how you guarantee the consistency that we established is necessary to overcome the lack of consistency mistake.
Exactly. This turns your daily routine into a perpetual language lab. Furthermore, we must embrace the rule of minimum commitment. On days when motivation is 0, commit to a minimum of 2 minutes of English output, not 20, just 2. Doing 2 minutes maintains the streak and prevents the neural pathway from dying. Fluency is sustained by never breaking the chain.
15. The final synthesis, the 8 pillars of confidence. Linda, we have covered an immense amount of ground, dismantling the confidence myth and building a robust framework for fluency. Before we conclude, let's offer our listeners a clear final summary of the 8 pillars they must focus on this week.
Absolutely, Ibrahim. This is the condensed roadmap. Remember that fluency and confidence are a synergy of mindset and action. The pillar, mindset; the action, drill. Pillar 1, the confidence myth. Action, embrace momentum over accuracy. Pillar 2, passive knowledge gap. Action, use the internal monologue method daily. Pillar 3, retrieval speed. Action, implement the 3 times rule for vocabulary activation. Pillar 4, accent anxiety. Action, prioritize clarity, mirror work over perfection. Pillar 5, fossilized errors. Action, maintain and use the strategic error log. Pillar 6, conversational structure. Action, master strategic discourse markers, e.g., furthermore, ultimately. Pillar 7, flow disruption. Action, use cognitive fillers to manage self-correction. Pillar 8, sustainability. Action, implement habit stacking for consistency.
These 8 actions are not optional. They are the non-negotiable price of admission to C2 fluency. They move the learner from passively hoping for fluency to actively manufacturing it. 16. The ultimate challenge and conclusion.
We've spent the hour providing the strategies. Now, the commitment rests with you. Motivation will fade, but the right habit will endure.
Your ultimate challenge from the Infinity English podcast is to select one major recurring mistake you identified in this session, perhaps the fear of speaking, and commit to its corresponding solution, the Monologue Method, for 7 consecutive days. That is all, just 7 days of deliberate action.
If you break the chain, do not quit. Just restart the next day. Remember the rule of minimum commitment. 2 minutes is better than 0.
Don't let this knowledge dissipate. If this comprehensive roadmap has empowered you to take control of your fluency journey, please show your support. Like this video right now and subscribe to the Infinity English podcast so you never miss another deep dive into C2 mastery.
We thrive on your engagement. Tell us in the comments, which of the 8 pillars are you committing to mastering first?
Thank you for joining us. Now go forth, speak confidently, and enjoy the ultimate reward of fluency.